panel to go sort of from the home level up to the distribution system to the wholesale level and think about the various value streams that are there. There are a lot of ones we could talk about. It's, on the Nest side, how smart thermostats could help with introduction of new rates, which could be a benefit to the grid and utilities, to avoiding feeders being built on the grid, all kinds of ancillary services, basically. We're going to touch on a bunch of them. So I'm going to start off with Will. Talk a bit about what those sleek little devices do with respect to the grid. It's obviously customer technology, but what kinds of services and products are you offering to help serve the utilities?
Great question. And the device, it controls the temperature on your wall, so whether the compressor turns on or off, it's great.
I don't know. I don't even have a thermostat in my house.
But it is a really powerful device, and I think part of where we started was with the audacious goal of, when Nest started 2010, thermostats obviously were not consumer products. It was almost a weird idea to have it as a consumer product, but thinking of them as consumer products is really powerful for the simple reason that that's how you get really millions of these things into people's homes. And when they're in people's homes, they do provide a lot of ancillary benefits. And so the thing was designed just right out of the box to save people energy. And so there's sort of that energy saving story. And there's a work paper that SC is close to rolling out soon, and sort of being able to bring sort of the smart thermostat rebate and that saving story in. And then what we did, we started thinking about, okay, so you have a device, saves people energy, that's great. And people want to save energy. I think that's part of it too, is that's sort of a leading reason why people buy these things. How can we help them save even more, and how can we help save the grid more, right? So then we came up with a couple different services. The first, seasonal savings, think of it as just deployable energy efficiency. So we basically make small tweaks to people's schedules during the beginning of the cooling season, the heating season, and then we can save people even more. So that's this really, really simple energy efficiency program that we run. And what's great about it too is we message customers directly on the device and the app, and 80% of people say, yes, help me save more money. And so it's this very simple way to take our base of installed Nests and actually get additional energy efficiency benefits. And then, of course, demand response, we launched our Rush Hour Rewards program in 2013. So we just finished our 4th summer. We're working with around 30 different utilities right now, different energy providers. And for us, that was demand response. I mean, we can get into it. It can be used in a lot of different ways. And I think that's part of the conversations today. But that's been sort of a key part of the story, is both for the customer and for the grid of how can you sort of save energy at key times to actually deliver value. So we've been busy.
Yeah. I think I read that you have a partnership with SCE, Southern California Edison,
yes.
Right? I think I read 50,000 customers are in the program or could eventually be in the program, and it could alleviate about 50 megawatts of energy capacity in Southern California.
Yeah, so SCE, that's a great, so we're working actually with all the 3 major IOUs in California. SCE we've been working with since 2013. And it was this summer we went really big. We sort of unlocked a larger rebate to, with the Aliso Canyon issues, energy was needed, and that enabled us to sort of 3x enrollments, take 3 years worth of enrollments and then 3x that in a couple months. And so obviously that made a lot of people really happy, but I think for us it just pointed to we're kind of just getting started. And again, biggest thing for us is there's just this huge latent untapped resource that we're just beginning to tap, and then there's many different value streams that we can deliver.
Yeah, the Aliso Canyon example really seemed to accelerate a lot of technologies. It's a good fire test for a lot of DER solutions, I think. Ryan, I remember being on a panel with you, and you told me people think of SolarCity as a solar company. We're actually a platform company in your mind. Describe what that means. What is the platform that you're building? What can it do?
Yeah, so SolarCity indeed was known for delivering one main product, solar, and I think underappreciated was a lot of the internal capabilities were scalable beyond solar. And there is the platform itself. Most people think of the software control platform, which indeed SolarCity has and is building and is extending. What's unique and nice about it, it's our platform that we use for all of our assets deployed across the country. And for 10 years now, it's been getting data coming back second by second from all these assets. And it's starting to be scaled so that it can send signals and embrace other DERs like storage, electric vehicles, load control, et cetera. And that is getting its run and starting to become really useful in providing dynamic capacity, dynamic value for grid operators. That is a new shiny piece of the product puzzle at SolarCity, but there are other capabilities also internally that I would also describe as platform or enabling a platform. Financing for solar is very applicable for financing other assets, batteries, for example. The ops machine, SolarCity for a while developed a reputation of driving costs down, and that is applicable to any other DERs in the space of rapid innovation, finding a good technology, driving it down as fast as we can. And Commissioner Picker mentioned, obviously, the same thing happening with the Gigafactory on the battery side. And so these things are extensible, and we really like it because not only is there market opportunity there, but we think it's aligned with grid principles, which is a diversified set of assets is better than a single asset. And we think that we can address a broader range of grid needs if we have a big toolkit, a lot of different assets we can pick from, and then tailor those for the solution, or tailor those actually for the challenge or the problem at hand.
Yeah, I think we get in a habit of thinking about DERs, and really we're just talking about solar, but there's obviously demand response, efficiency, as you guys are now an EV and energy storage company as well. So just to follow up on the platform concept, again, sticking maybe to the software side, how important is that in realizing grid benefits, whatever benefits those are that you're seeing? What does that platform have to be able to do for there to be some kind of societal or utility benefit?
We think it's absolutely critical. You mentioned, or Commissioner, once again, Picker mentioned in the last panel, all of the renewables that are coming on the grid. The grid is going to be more dynamic on a minute-by-minute and a second-by-second basis. Having granular, targeted, and flexible control of these assets to make them do what you want to do is not just going to be an additional value add. We think it's going to be a critical capability for the vast majority of the assets that are on the grid. And so what the system we envision right now, it looks basically like an extension of either the control center that Lorenzo is familiar with or works with at the CAISO, or the control center at a utility where they have dynamic control of a set of assets. We're simply extending that control down to very granular assets behind the meter or in front of the meter, and generally with an upgrade in some nice technology. The assets respond faster. You can see the data second by second for any asset, which is uncommon for most grid operators, or at least most utility operators who have to rely on SCADA networks that take a while sometimes to see these assets. And you're seeing, if you want, thousands of them on a feeder, and you can go drive down to a single service transformer if you choose, which in the near term is not the piercing use case, I don't think, but long term maybe it could be valuable. Or you can aggregate it up, and you can reduce complexity by taking a look at all the assets behind, say, a substation, controlling those assets as if they were one, which a virtual power plant is usually the common moniker for that. It's not dissimilar to how we think actually about retail customers, residential or commercial customers. The market is getting increasingly complex for them. The rates are complex, the choices are complex. One of the things you need to be good at selling to them is reducing that complexity. There's a similar analogy on the grid operator side. Meet them where they are, make the data come up into their interfaces, so our platform connects into their platform, allow them to control at the level they want to control.
Yeah, another SCE example from a talk yesterday at our workshop, Mark Martinez was saying it's not really relevant what the DERs do anymore. We kind of know what they individually do. It's how they're networked that's really going to matter to us going forward. And probably also matters the wholesale CAISO level, I'm sure, as last year FERC approved CAISO to allow DERs to participate in the wholesale energy and ancillary services market. So Lorenzo, from your perspective, what do you need the DERs to be able to do to offer assets or offer benefits at the ISO level?
Well, I would say it's a whole system approach. It's not just what the DERs do that's important, but we're approaching it from really three distinct areas. One is just creating the models for them to participate in the wholesale market. So in response to what FERC approved last year and also the rulemaking they issued in November, we're looking at developing aggregation models so that a developer can aggregate a large number of small resources, create something that's at least 0.5 megawatt in capacity, and participate in the market. We have 5 entities that have signed up as DER providers and are, I imagine, in the process of developing the actual resources they want to bring to the markets. But then they'll be able to supply us with imbalance energy and ancillary services. So that participation, and we have continuing stakeholder initiatives to refine the rules, because in the old days, the only thing on distribution side that was responsive was DR. With the proliferation of DER types, now the types of resources that can participate are becoming a lot more diverse, new ways of putting diverse resources together to create a virtual resource. The second area has to do with forecasting. What will be the effect of DER on the net demand? The ISO only sees the system down to the transmission distribution interface. We don't have visibility to what's going on. Even if we have, say, telemetry on some of the devices, we don't see the system, the distribution wires system, and what's happening there. So, and then there are a lot of devices that are not participating in the market. They're simply serving the needs of a customer. They're behaving in certain ways. How do you take all of that information, all of that behavior, and then show the ISO what are we going to see at the transmission distribution interface so we can plug that into our optimization market models and run our markets? The third part is an area that the industry, I think, was not paying attention to up until about a year ago, which is what's the new relationship between the transmission operator and the distribution operator. That historically, we've had very little interaction with the distribution companies in real time as operators of the system. And that's something that really needs to change. We've been working with the utilities. There's a working group under More Than Smart where we're getting into, here's a DER, say it's a smart building or a microgrid, and it's capable of providing services and it bids into the ISO market. Well, historically, it would give a bid to the ISO would issue a dispatch, the distribution company doesn't know anything because it doesn't have that information. So what's the coordination that we need to arrange so that between the DER provider, distribution company, and the ISO, we are now in coordination around real-time operation and everything works reliably?
How is that achieved? Who has to talk to whom? And we saw a chart or a graphic yesterday that More Than Smart put up, a sort of flow chart of multiple players who all had to communicate. Does that system exist? Who's making it? When will it be realized?
Well, at this point in the process, we're starting to define what the needs are and some of the basic ideas of what you would do. So, for example, a resource bids into the ISO market, we issue a dispatch instruction. Well, the ISO could provide those dispatch instructions to the distribution company, and they would at least have knowledge where that resource is, that, oh, it's getting a dispatch from the ISO. That means 5 minutes from now it's going to be doing this. Is that going to create a problem for us? Or another thing I've learned from now spending more time talking to the distribution operators, by comparison, the transmission grid the ISO runs is pretty stable topologically. We're having some outages and derates occasionally, but on distribution, they're having changes in topology all the time. They're switching circuits. Things are out for different reasons. So it's a much more volatile system, and in that regard, it can affect whether a DER can actually respond to a dispatch or not. So another piece of the communication framework is how can the distribution utility communicate with the DER operator, provide up-to-date system information on circuits that may affect its ability to perform.
What is the potential for this? Like, I understand that it's a potential value stream, but how much of, say, SolarCity's revenue is going to come from wholesale markets? So you don't have to put a specific number on it, but just how would you describe the opportunity we're looking at here? It seems like a lot of work. Is it really worth it?
I think it's potentially massive. And you can view it as incremental revenue, which is not small. So we have existing, let's say our C&I business, commercial industrial battery business. You have an asset that's already been sold. It's doing demand charge savings. Those assets can access the wholesale market, some of those products now, and have, I'll say, a meaningful bump that is very meaningful, certainly for margins and for profits. So there's a significant upside if the asset's already in the ground. So layering on that, both new products make the revenues larger, and more assets involved in that, you get more value. That's important. But there's also all the projects that don't happen because they don't have enough revenue. And so we have dozens. Many of our projects, we have a customer that's willing to put, say, a battery in to do demand charge arbitrage, but it doesn't quite make the economics. If you're able either to access the wholesale markets or provide distribution capacity or transmission capacity in a bilateral with utility, that can make the difference. So it's actually binary. You wouldn't be putting an asset in the absence of going after these additional revenue streams. So if you think of it in that regard, a significant chunk of your installed base could be fully enabled by these revenue streams. And then you get into the societal side of all of the potential benefits in planning in a more nimble approach or having more options, not getting locked into 45-year assets that you can't do anything with once it's in. You can't alter them. There's a potential significant cost reduction for the grid at large if planning embraces these more nimble assets.
We did hear yesterday how the CPUC might start looking at environmental justice component and how DERs could help serve that, sort of a political need to address some communities that have bad pollution problems and maybe overlapping that with some DER benefits, and that could unlock maybe some other opportunities. Maybe going back to a point Lorenzo said, but putting it to you, Will, talking about how reliable DERs are. You guys have been doing demand response for a long time. That's pretty, I think, well understood. But what other opportunities are there, and how do you enhance that? What also, basically, how do you enhance the role of smart thermostats, and what are the problems you're running into in doing that?
Absolutely. So I think when we got started, everything was about these bring your own thermostat programs, which were great, but they didn't ask that much. It was, someone needs to just enroll in this program, and then we're gonna, call them when we need them. But there was no sense of here's a target. This is the load that you need to provide at this time, and there was definitely no sense of sort of locational value or unlocking even different sorts of value through shaping or the like. And so I think part of this is we've learned a lot over the last 4 years. And when you start dealing with larger numbers, you have this wonderful thing in which everything becomes much more predictive. If you're trying to figure out, okay, if I deploy these 25 thermostats, what am I going to get? Well, someone might not be home, a cloud might come over, someone's Wi-Fi might not be working right, and so suddenly it gets very hard. But once you get to much larger numbers, you can actually be very predictive. And so I think we've been very good at sort of figuring that out, and I think we're really excited about moving to the next phase, which is now that we sort of know what we can get, how can we shape it to really meet the grid's needs more? And so there's sort of almost unlimited potential when you start thinking about, so when you're thinking about smart thermostats, you're actually thinking about the home as a battery. I think sometimes that's missed. So once you start thinking about the home as a battery, a lot of things can happen there. And so in terms of what we need, part of it is I think what we've all been saying, which is we're all sort of marching down together, but being able to recognize and unlock the value that comes from being truly a flexible grid resource, from sort of the value that can be delivered at more of a locational, through locational DR. And part of it too is, some of the programs that we've been running, actually recognizing value streams over longer time horizons. So it becomes very powerful when you can say, okay, the lifespan of this thermostat's 10 years. I can get EE benefits and DR benefits for even 5 years. Suddenly the economics become really, really compelling. Devices become free to the customers. It's very easy to actually go really big really quickly. So there's a lot of different things, but I would say yes, moving out of sort of BYO programs in which you dispatch what you can get to being targeted flexible grid resources.
Those little things can do so much. Who knew? You mentioned locational benefits, so maybe looking at another value stream, I guess more on the distribution side. I understand that through the CPUC's distribution resources planning, there's a locational net benefit analysis tool that's, I guess, trying to figure out where those benefits could be realized. Ryan, are you guys involved with creating that tool? How far along is it in being created, and what's the potential, and is it working yet?
There are many people involved with creating that tool. Some people would think that's part of the challenge. It is evolving, and I think a lot of credit needs to be passed to both the regulator.
Actually, let's pause you for a minute. Can everyone hear him okay?
Did that drop off?
Okay. Okay.
Okay. The vision to have the tool, first of all, sits with the regulator, and then the utilities have been pushing methodologies. They published a methodology in very quick turnaround in the DRP last year that is a wonderful foundation, and then a lot of entities in these working groups that Renzo mentioned are really evolving them. I would suggest one misconception we think with the LNBAs, the Locational Net Benefit Analysis tool, is that it is either a pricing tool or a contracting tool, or rates can be set explicitly on this tool. We think of it differently. We think of it as a scan of where value is across the grid. Once again, Commissioner Picker mentioned earlier that peaks may change year to year. Locational value could change year to year. It's very dynamic, and I don't think the ambition of this tool is to set it once, know it definitively, and make contracts around it. It's an amazing scanning tool that says, hey, Central Valley, when Diablo Canyon goes down, is going to have capacity challenges for the next 5 years. Do DERs make sense in a broad swath of this area where there may be some congestion challenges, and maybe through transmission planning or TPP, they would look at larger assets that might take 10 years to get on. LNBA should flag that earlier and give folks like my company and many of the companies here a heads up that this area could be very valuable. And so we view it as a periodic tool that informs more policy and broad planning than necessarily a scalpel that says this flows into a sourcing mechanism per se. And maybe I'll say, to answer your question, it's getting very close. It adds value now, and I would suggest that the methodology is improving constantly and always will improve constantly.
I would just like to add a point about system benefits, because in addition to locational, there's an important system benefit that I think is not well recognized. Everybody's familiar with the duck curve, really low belly of the duck, excess power, and as we project it with higher percentages of renewables, it starts to look worse. That problem can be largely solved at distribution level. As Will was saying, a house becomes a battery. Every endpoint on the distribution system can start to look like a battery. Sometimes it's consuming, sometimes it's injecting, and in the way it operates, you can smooth the load profile, you can smooth the volatility at the local level, because the system load curve, the duck curve, is only what you add up from all the endpoints, and it becomes the cumulative demand that the ISO faces. But not all the value has been clearly monetized in terms of services to be able to do that. And I think that's an important piece of evolution of our thinking about retail rates, for example, more dynamic rates, so that you now get the response at the local level to say, I'm going to install a battery with my solar. Why? Because I have less impact on the grid and I can help to smooth volatility. Those benefits will add up to huge system benefits.
Well, in the nature of this panel, so you talked about the system, let's go down to the customer. Do they understand that value? What is that conversation like? And I think we're kind of getting a question here, actually I'll specifically ask it. As distributed solar moves increasingly toward customer ownership, what contractual arrangements will SolarCity have to control DERs? So mirroring the concepts you're forwarding here with the customer side of it.
Sure, it's straightforward. We have contracts now where we sell solar systems, or even have a loan that we don't own to solar customers. Most of those come with an O&M, an operations and maintenance component, where SolarCity remains the entity that provides the maintenance over the life of that asset, warranties it, services it, all those functions, and also has the right to dispatch it for different grid services. That dispatch component is a separate part that we discuss in the contracting process, so the customer is aware. And usually it's a value add where we say, if, for example, you put solar and a battery in your home, it could cost this much. If you allow us to dispatch it with some minimum state of charge that's always available to you, we can reduce the price significantly for you. And it's a customer's choice, but many are often saying, I'll take the price reduction and allow you to dispatch it for us.
Will, are you also having those discussions?
Sure, direct corollary, yeah. It's a smaller purchase item, a $250 thermostat, but I would say part of what was so effective in Southern California and other places is if you take an efficiency rebate, so you get it down $50 or $75, and then you take the savings, you get 15% savings over the course of a year, you get another $100, and then you can add in another $50 to $100 for responsive load, however you monetize that, you get to a free device, right? And that's just a crazy place to be. But again, I think it comes back to giving customers choice, and I think part of also what we think a lot about is as things get more complex, I really like what you were saying before, things get more and more complex, we actually want to make things simpler and simpler for the customers. And by making things simpler, actually, we feel like we can unlock even more complexity. But there is sort of that translation that needs to happen, whether that's through an aggregator or directly with a partner.
What if this all goes really badly? But no, I just wonder, I feel like there will be people in the conversation who ask, like, is this too simple for the customer but so complex on the other side? There's lots of ways that people might be concerned that DERs just won't perform the way they're expected to. So can you guarantee savings for the customer? How are you addressing that concern?
I think it's it's something that we think a lot about, which is if you're providing a benefit to the customer, that needs to be very transparent and easy to understand. So for us, it boils, when I'm talking about simplifying it, everything boils down to either savings or rewards, right? So there's different ways, and we're running, a time of use program with SolarCity around time of savings. So it's a savings program for time of use rates. We have seasonal savings, just saves across the board. That's really clear, but part of that is being able to come back to the customer and say, this is actually what we're delivering, this is what we're saving. And then the other part, of course, with the rewards program, I think that's where we can actually can free us up to do more, because if rather than having to explain to the customer every single thing we're doing to balance the grid at all these times, distribution, everything, if you just say, we pledge to you to keep you comfortable and in control, and then we pledge to you to be able to deliver X, I think we can get pretty far.
Lorenzo, do you have a point to add?
Yeah, I just want to add one note of caution in this area of what could possibly go wrong. And it's not necessarily going wrong, but it's a challenge that from the perspective of the developers, they're looking to stack revenue streams. And that leads to, let's refine every little possible product or service that the resources can provide so we can get multiple revenue streams. From the other side of that, that could be a nightmare in a sense, because the more you stack revenue streams, you have to define them, you have to define performance requirements, you have to measure them, you have to make, so this whole area of what we call multiple use applications is a hugely complex issue. And I think it would be worthwhile to deliberately search for simpler ways to do that. Let's find what are the really essential values, and I think local management of load shapes, smoothing load profiles, managing volatility is a really valuable service, and let's focus on those high-value services, figure out the right ways to compensate them, but not create a whole lot of complexity with multiplicity of markets and market products that then creates a huge requirement of communications and measurement infrastructure and so on, and endless arguments about double payment. So I'd like to sort of steer us to this other direction.
Yeah. On the locational element, which I think you referenced there, I think some studies have shown there are like 5% of places in California that are super, super compelling for some of these, and then a lot that just aren't, like, because you're targeting down to such a specific area of the grid. Maybe it's a question for Ryan of like, are you worried that you almost pigeonhole the industry by only focusing on those high value areas, which it does make sense to start there, but is the opportunity big enough? Could you almost back yourself into a corner by making that the whole case for DER aggregation and deployment?
No, I don't think many folks have advocated for only paying for assets in a certain area. It's more of a carrot if you are in that area, is most of the rate designs that we've come across. And there are still system level benefits. If you're on the ISO grid, you're providing system level benefits. Or if you are providing system level benefits, it doesn't matter where you are. And I think we're open to components. So rate structures have the ability to have an average value that reflects the system benefit, cover most of the state. And we're not scared. We're actually open to and often supportive of adding carrots to places where it can provide additional value. And it drives innovation, it drives some capabilities. At a higher level, if we can focus on what the grid needs, then that is the long-term equilibrium that our business has to reflect. So we're not scared of those challenges.
And to pick up on something Commissioner Picker said, wild ponies like carrots.
Okay, we have 1 minute left to do rapid fire questions. Okay, networking DERs raises the whole cybersecurity risk. So how does CAISO protect these networks and their interfaces? What requirements do your customers have to meet with respect to cyberspace?
In 3 seconds.
Yes.
We're working on it.
Okay.
Our market design group has partnered with, we've got an internal guy now who's a really fabulous expert on cybersecurity. So we're starting to dig into those issues.
One more for Solar City. How will energy efficiency fit into your future platform?
Energy efficiency is a DER, so we recognize the value of it. Whether we deploy it, Solar City has deployed in its history energy efficiency itself. Whether we deploy it or not, we view it as a very valid and great part of a portfolio of DR assets. So we embrace it as part of it, and whether we deploy it or not, I think we'll see.
And
Yes.
follow up on that? Yes? Okay, great. We are out of time, so we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for being on the panel, guys.
Yay.